Hi, I'm Noah Huber-Feely, the lead organizer for these weekly co-working nights, and I'd like to introduce Brian Powell here. He's not only an incredible podcaster, but is also a contributor to one of the most amazing frameworks I've ever seen. It is not only revolutionizing Ruby development, but also the entire way we approach web design and web app development. So without further ado, here's Brian Powell.
Thanks, Noah. It's not that awesome. Okay, we good? All right, so I'm Brian Powell. You can follow me on Twitter at BrianP if you want. I sometimes say interesting things. Sometimes they get retweeted. So I'm here to talk a little bit about my background and my company and the open source software that we build. I want to start kind of with a backstory, who I am. So I'm a developer. I'm also the founder and CEO of Metabon. I started the company 8 years ago here in Huntsville. I left school to do it. I was 20 at the time. I started it 2 weeks before I got engaged. Not something I would recommend. Everything's worked out great. So I sort of left to start this out of a desire to kind of do things the way I wanted to do them, build the software that I wanted to build, work with the clients that I wanted to work with. I had come out of kind of a bad startup situation. There were some shady things going on. So I wanted to have total control over that. Kind of reflecting that, Metabon's been completely bootstrapped from the beginning. We've not taken any outside investment. We've courted investors, but we've never actually followed through and taken them up on any offers. Jumping out, starting the company, I would say is one of the best decisions I ever made for myself. It's a lot of hard work, very, very, very hard sometimes, but also rewarding. I would encourage everyone to do it. So Metabon is a software company. We build software that runs on the internet. So we build websites, we build web applications. We're a web company. Everyone that works for the company kind of cut their teeth on the web and has been involved with the web for a long time. It's what we love to do. There's sort of two sides to the company. So the revenue generating side right now is all consulting work. So we work with lots of clients. We've worked with Hudson Alpha here in town. We do a lot of work with them. Digium is another local company that we work for. We work with some of the best financial, or not financial, educational institutions in the States. We love our clients. So the way that works, they come to us with an idea. We help them conceptualize their idea. We design their product. We build it. We launch it. We get them all the way to version 1, sometimes beyond that. It's extremely fun. We solve some pretty interesting problems with the best clients in the business. We do a lot of work in Ruby. If you're familiar with Ruby, Ruby on Rails is something that we used early on. I've been using Rails since about 2005. Right before 1.0. And as I mentioned, we also do design work as well. Kind of a side note, if you're a web developer and you're looking for a job, you should probably come talk to me after. We're growing pretty quickly right now, so we'd love to talk. So, there's the client side of what we do, and that's interesting and good, but I really want to talk about Pacquiao. And this is really where the future of the company lies. It's what we're all super passionate about. It's what I'm passionate about. Pacquiao, it's a web framework. So it's a framework for building websites, web-based applications. Pacquiao was born out of needs that we had running a consulting company that was building these kinds of things for our clients. And that can really be boiled down to we wanted an easier way to build websites and web apps. We weren't happy with the tools that were out there. We did a lot of PHP, we did a lot of Rails, we even did some WordPress sites, and we just weren't super pleased with it. We wanted to be able to do the least amount of work we had to do to actually put something in front of the customer and let them, get a feel for the product that we're building for them. We didn't want to spend 3 months off in a room somewhere doing a lot of work and then show it to them. We wanted, within days, to be able to put something working in front of them so that they could use it and give us feedback. Pacquiao enables that. I want to walk through an example of that in a minute. You can basically prototype a website, prototype a web app, writing nothing but HTML code. You don't have to write any back-end things to build a prototype, which just makes development super fast. So that was kind of the original vision of Pacquiao, but it's really grown from that. A couple weeks ago, we finally pushed out a huge update called Pacquiao Real-Time, and it makes the process of building these real-time web apps with auto-updating views super easy. Pacquiao sort of solves all of the complex problems for you, and you can just sort of use it, and we'll see an example of that as well. So maybe you kind of see a pattern with where I'm going. Like, we're really concerned about making web development easier than it ever has been. And to a large degree, we've succeeded in that. And all the steps that we take tomorrow and next week and next year sort of just keep getting us closer to that idea of making a framework that's so easy to use that anyone, no matter what their experience level, can have an idea and can build it and launch it using Pacquiao. We want someone who didn't think that they could build something without a learning curve, be able to build and launch it and show the world. So I'm gonna do some live coding, which is dangerous, but bear with me. I want to kind of give you a feel for what it's like working with Pacquiao. Can you all see that okay? Make it bigger. Okay. So command line, not so scary, I promise. So who all here has used Ruby before? Okay, just a handful of people. So Ruby Gems is a package manager. You would gem install Pacquiao, which we're not going to wait on. I don't know what my network is like. I have it installed. And you now have a Pacquiao command. You can create a project. Let's call this cowork talk, walk. That's fine too. Live coding for the win. And with one command, we can start a server. And it's now running. So we can go to localhost 3000. If you're familiar with Rails, this, kind of the same thing. We get this really nice guide for how to get started. So let me open up the code base and let's see what was generated for us. So we have this directory structure. I'm sorry, I can't actually make the sidebar any bigger. It's the limitation of the editor that I've chosen to use. But we have this views directory inside of app, and this is all of the front end of our website that we're building. So we have this generated one, index.html. It has everything that we've been looking at in the browser. We can delete that and say, like, this is our cool app. Refresh. Okay, we see it. Awesome. Not much to that. What's cool though is, so we've got like this complete template engine built into Pacquiao, and it's all driven with HTML. So you don't have to write anything but HTML to get these really nice composable templates and things like that. So inside of our templates directory, we have this default one, and this is what Pacquiao uses by default. You'll see here we have a container. A container defines, basically it's saying, put the content from a specific page into this part of our template. And so we could, put something here, we could create a paragraph tag, and we could say whatever. It's not really that important. We can refresh that, and now we see whatever, and then we see this is our cool app, and if we wanted to view source, we could see that we have the paragraph tag from our template, and then we have our page content that was sort of composed into this template. Again, this is just expressed with HTML. There's not a lot to it. You can do some other cool things. Who uses Markdown for writing content? Okay, sweet. So I'm going to show that. So let's say we have some content that we want to put in here, but we don't want to write it in HTML because it's just a blog post or something like that. We can write this HTML comment with @include, and this says include this partial that I'm going to define right into this part of my page. So partials are hidden off the screen. They also start with an underscore. So I created an underscore content.md file, which is a Markdown file. The other thing that we'd want to do is include the Powell Markdown library. We're going to bundle so that it installs our dependency. Run it again. Now we can actually put Markdown content in here. We can say, wow, that was easy. And we could make that italics, say. All right, and we have italics. So now we have Markdown content that's being mixed into our HTML content. You can write your views in literally any template language that you want. Doesn't have to be HTML. We use HTML, we use Markdown, we use Haml, we use Slim, but literally anything would be supported. And like we've seen here, you can write some of your content in Markdown. You could write some of it in Slim. You could write some of it in HTML. Doesn't matter. It's all composed into HTML in the end. The other kind of interesting part of Powell that's really different if you've done any sort of back-end development, say, or traditional app development like Rails, is your views never contain any logic in Powell. So if you want to put data into your view, say, it's very different than something like Rails. So let's say we have this part of our view is going to represent a blog post. And we have our blog post title, and then we have our content as well, blog post content. So in Powell, you basically, when you're building your view, you say, this part of my view represents this part of my data, of my application. So here I've already added the data-scope attribute. And what I'm doing as the front-end developer is saying, this node represents a post in my view. And then your attributes you would label with props, and you would say, okay, that represents the title of the scope, so it's the post title, and this is the post body, of course. We can view that. There's our prototype. We've got some fake data that's just baked right into our view. And that's the view. That's all we have to say. So actually putting data into this happens completely externally from this view file. And I want to show you that real quick. So I opened up lib routes, and this routes file basically defines all of your backend logic that's going to be executed for a specific request that's made to your application. So we can say for our default route, we don't want to log anything, but what we do want to do is bind some data into our view. We want to present some blog posts. So let me write the code and then I'll walk through it. Okay, so what we're saying here is this is really our logic, right? This is just the definition of our data. We're doing it in line. You might pull from a database or something like that. What we're saying here is view.scope post. So let's address the part of our view that represents our scope, and let's just apply this data to it. And let's see what happens. Okay, so I refresh, and now we see the data that's being bound in from the backend application. So you might imagine, again, pulling some data from a database, data that's changing. We're able to put that into our view. And if we view source, predictably, that data is exactly where we'd found it, or where we would expect it. Our titles and our title node and our bodies and our body node, it's just replaced the prototyped data that was in our view. So it just simply replaces it. If we want to present multiple things, we can do that easily. So we could create an array of objects and create a second post. Formatting's all screwed up, but whatever. So now we have 2 posts. Again, our view just matches the data set that we're applying to it. Super easy. So you can kind of imagine how this would work in practice, right? You meet with a client, you determine basic requirements for a web application. You go off with your team for 3 days, and you write some HTML code. And you come back with a prototype that they can click around in. And all you've done at that point is written HTML code. You've not invested anything into really building a complex application. You present it, they make a bunch of changes, but no problem because you haven't invested 3 days. It's not costing anyone a lot of time. So you can quickly react to these things, and then you can add your backend code to the application without making any changes to your view, which is cool because now if you have a larger team, say, and part of your team works on the front end or the views and some people work on the back end, they now have their own separate spaces to work in. Then no one's stepping on each other's toes. The other cool thing that I'll show real quick is you can start your application up in prototype mode. So now if we refresh, it just turned the back end off. Like none of our routing code is being executed. So our design team can now start the application up, put it right back into the mode that the prototype was built in, and make whatever changes they want to make to the application without having to guess if the backend code's like doing something weird to their view. They know exactly what they're doing. So that's pretty cool. And I want to like pause here for a second before I move into kind of the next part, which is all the real-timey stuff, to see if there's any questions or any confusion yet in this.
So we have a couple of people here who are not web developers,
right,
and non-sort of techie. Just checking with you, does this make sense to you? And does the broader...
The application of it makes sense. The actual, like sitting there, because you're like, let me just type out this code real quick, and
yeah,
a layman would have no idea what you were doing.
Yeah, agreed.
How do you explain this to someone who is in a company who needs this done without making their mind go numb, explaining it with...
Yeah, you don't.
I'm already picking up like H is open an environment, close it with
Yeah.
the / to
Sure.
close the environment, entitling all the different like variables that you're defining yourself
Right.
as this is blog post, this is the content of blog post. I get that, and I'm
Yep.
putting that together as
Yep.
you go.
Cool.
But like, how do you? Because as someone who would want to develop a website, myself for say a company that sells merchandise, for a new, I don't know, whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, how does this help me, and how is it going to be approachable for everyone? Which is, I understand the scope
Right.
in the future.
So the question was, how is this going to be approachable for people who don't have a background in knowing HTML or things?
Right. Is it going to be Wix drag and drop?
So you should wait for the third part of this talk where I render everything that I'm telling you right now completely useless. None of this is actually...
is that the real time?
No, it's actually the part of the talk after real time.
Okay.
Which is
You might
really
wanna
short, I
start with
promise.
that one, for if you're going in a...
I could.
If you're going in a...
But you're going to be really impressed now.
I'm sure.
You're going to be really, really impressed.
Well, because like this makes me want to go and learn all of this
Yeah.
so that I can understand it.
Don't do that.
I'm
Don't do
not
that yet.
everyone.
Okay. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna move on. Hopefully there's no other questions. And I want to share the real time stuff because this is really where it gets cool. So I have another application that I've already built. I'm not going to do all of that live coding. I can tell you there's about 50 lines of code in this. There's really not much. That includes HTML, that includes Ruby, everything, about 50 lines. It's on GitHub. I'll give you a link at the end. Okay, so a little bit of background of what this is. So this is kind of an application that I prototyped. It is just an article. You could imagine this existing on the New York Times or something. And it's just an article. It has a title. It has some content. But I was thinking through maybe something that the New York Times would want to add to a boring static article page to make it more engaging. say. So this is a little contrived, but it's kind of interesting. So these counters, you'll see 1 and 1. The blue counter is the number of people that are currently viewing the page. And then the gray one is the number of total views that this page has ever had. And then this is just a comment form. So there's been 1 view because I hit the website, and there's 1 person on it because I'm on the website. So I'm going to add a comment. I can post it. Yay. Now there's 2 views. None of this happens in real time, though, so it actually doesn't really add anything to the experience. So if we have 2 users here, like, I have to refresh the screen as a user before these update, right? So like I can be over here refreshing, like creating page views, and my counter's counting, but then this user's counter is not counting. And what we really want is the user to feel engaged in this content once it kind of all happen right in front of you. Similarly, if this user creates a comment, well, the comment doesn't show up over here, and that's kind of lame, especially if you're going for more of like a chat type of thing. This is a terrible chat application. Again, I have to refresh. So how do we make this real time in Pacquiao land? Prepare to maybe be impressed. So there's these two method calls. So this is again, we're in our routes file. We've got a little bit of code basically just doing all of our rendering like I showed you before. We're actually fetching from a database. I'm using Redis as a data store. You could easily use Postgres or Mongo or whatever.
And question, are those just your definitions for yourself as to what each area of code does with the...
Yep, comments basically saying what each thing does.
Okay.
Yep.
I did LaTeX and we
Cool.
use stuff like that.
Yep. So all I'm going to do is add these .subscribe calls. And what these .subscribe calls do is say, okay, here's how we render our view. We're going to render it with this data. And we also want to subscribe the rendered view to any changes in data that occur in the future that would affect its rendering. Okay, so that's a fancy way of saying whenever someone joins the page, we want that to automatically update for anyone who's currently looking. Whenever a comment's added, we want that to show up immediately. Okay, so we add those .subscribe calls, we save our code, and I'm going to refresh. So if everything works. Now everything's happening. You'll notice this user, I'm not refreshing. They're just sitting here looking at the page while this other user is furiously refreshing, and the counter's counting immediately in front of them. We can actually have a real chat conversation. So my comments show up for this user automatically. And as the developer, I didn't have to write any of this code. All of this is managed for me. I just say, I want the view to be subscribed to future changes in state, and so it's subscribed to future changes in state. Pacquiao figures out how to make it happen.
How do you avoid refreshing the entire page and refreshing just a single environment? Is that
excellent question? That's a really good question. So we're pushing down we call them diffs. So it's like we know what state the client is currently presenting, and we know the change, and so we're basically just sending the change down. And
that would be so annoying if you're sitting there like commenting and like the whole
yes.
page.
No, so in fact, like only the changes are rendered. So when we get the diff, we say sometimes the diff would include something that you don't actually need to change, but we go through it and we say, okay, what is actually changed, and let's make them the fewest amount of changes necessary to render that new state. And what that avoids is like complete DOM replacement, complete view rendering, so it's really fast.
Yeah.
There's a demo video I put together of we were hammering a server with like 1,000 socket connections a second, and this counter was keeping up, but you could still like type comments, and like those were showing up in real time. It was pretty sweet. I don't know why I didn't put that in the presentation. But you'll notice there's like one other thing here that kind of sucks. So when I submit a comment, it refreshes the entire page, so I have to like click again to get back into this field. We can fix that too with Pacquiao. And I'm just going, well, okay, I'll type it. My shortcut didn't work. So there's this thing that ships with Pacquiao. It's a front-end library. It's called Ring. You never really have to write anything using it. It's a JavaScript framework. You can write JavaScript components with Ring. You can do some interesting things like control your JavaScript client code from your server, send it messages from the server, and call JavaScript methods from your Ruby code. So you can do some interesting things like that if you want to. But it ships with a whole set of components, and you can attach components to a node using this data-UI attribute. There's a component called mutable. Mutable essentially interprets user interaction with the view and determines which interactions are going to have an impact on the state of the application. So in our case here, we're attaching mutable to a form. So mutable knows when the form's submitted, all right, that's going to cause a change in the application, so it tells the application about it. So if we refresh now, I can type, and we're not actually getting page refreshes anymore. So what it's doing is it's submitting the form over a WebSocket to the server, and then the server's processing it through its normal HTTP routes. It's just like a WebSocket interface to your HTTP routes. And the server's responding okay. We're getting our new diff because a new comment was created. Everything sort of works out of the box.
And so the focus would stay on the field that was last touched, and if there
Exactly.
were other fields that were interactive, the cursor wouldn't move or focus wouldn't move.
Yep, exactly. So when mutable gets a 200 OK back from the server saying, yay, we did what you asked, it does a revert. It reverts the UI. Anytime you interact with it, that interaction is saved as a diff on your client side. So we can roll back to any previous change in the application.
How far back does it log?
All the way from first load, which you could argue is bad, but it could be. We're only saving diffs, so they're small. But when the form's submitted, we do a revert. We just roll back to the previous state before it was submitted.
Can you have it go to a separate, like, instead of the last entered field, can you have it, or last entered form, whatever, can you have it go to a specific separate form or something like that?
You could.
Which there would be no need to, but.
Yeah, you totally could. You'd have to write some custom code. Kind of the line that we've drawn in the sand is you don't have to write JavaScript code to get this real-time capability. If you're familiar with building real-time apps, you know you have to write a lot of JavaScript typically to make it work. You have to move at least part of your application to the client side, and now you have many problems. You have state, you have to write code that manages the application state in multiple places on your client and your server, and that's hard. And it's just no fun. So kind of what we're saying is you don't have to do that. You just write your traditional back-end driven application. Pacquiao figures out how to handle all the front-end stuff for you. But being realistic, there are some cases where you have really complex UI interactions, things that aren't supported by browsers out of the box, like drag and drop. If you want to build a drag and drop interface, you're going to have to write some JavaScript code to do that. There's just no way around it. So we've made it with Ring, which is the JavaScript library for Pacquiao. We've just made it really easy to do that. But the only thing that you have to express is the user interaction part. You don't have to describe or deal with application state in that code. You're just describing the UI interaction. So it's not so bad. We just wrapped up a huge project for a client, and I pulled up the statistics, and there's 3% of it's JavaScript code. And I can't talk too much about what the application is, but there's a lot of real-time aspects to it. There's a lot of WebRTC stuff, so like real-time video chat, things like that. And 3% of the code base is JavaScript, which is pretty sweet. Okay, so that's my live coding. I'm probably going way over time. I apologize, but I want to talk about a couple more things. So what I've shown you so far is just Pacquiao, the framework. There's actually two other parts to Pacquiao that we haven't really pushed out. So you all are sort of getting a preview of things to come. So what you're looking at right there, and hopefully you can all see it, is a screenshot of a new tool called Console. And Console is a browser-based tool that attaches to your Pacquiao application, and it lets you do development-related things locally in your browser. You can install complete pieces of functionality into your application with its plugin architecture. So say you want to build something, but you don't want to write the code. With Console, you don't have to. Let's say you want to build that thing that we just saw. It was basically a blog, and it had a real-time comments system. You could install a couple of plugins, and you now have that code in your application. You didn't have to write it. Console gives you a theming system for installing, managing themes. And one of the really exciting things is the deployment tools that ship with Console. So you'll see maybe this release tab at the top of the navigation. So when you're ready to share your Pacquiao app with the world, you click release. It's going to ask you for a couple of things. It's going to completely provision an environment for you on the cloud, push your code up to it, literally one-click deploy, and you've got whatever it is that you've built running for the world to see. Super easy. If you've used Heroku is really easy. This is even easier than that. So we're really excited about it. Console also ships with tools in production. So if you have people that you want to manage your application, all of your data is available to be managed through a Console UI on your production environment. There's a really rich content editor for managing content. If you've ever written for medium.com, it's kind of like that, but it's right there for your application. So Console, open source, free, just like Pacquiao. You could use it for anything. The third sort of fancy thing is called Pacquiao Platform. And Pacquiao Platform really brings a lot to this ecosystem. So I said that in Console you could get this one-click deployment ability. Where you're actually putting that is inside of Platform. So Platform is infrastructure for your application. You could run a Pacquiao application anywhere. It's easiest to run it on Platform. The other really interesting thing about Platform is you can go to Pacquiao.com. You can select the kind of application that you want to build from a series of templates. You can give it a name, and you can click a button, and it's created for you within seconds. That application, be it a blog or a marketing website or a shopping cart or whatever the case, is created in seconds, spun up for you, where you can go in, change the plugins out, buy a theme, whatever it is that you need to do. It's all up there running for you. You never had to pull anything down to your local computer to set it up. It just works. It also integrates with GitHub. So let's say you build a blog and you need to add some really advanced feature to it, and you hire Kyle, who's an awesome Pacquiao developer, to add said feature. You add him to your Platform account, he connects it to a GitHub repository, he pulls the source code down, he makes the changes that he wants to make, pushes it back up to GitHub. Platform sees that new code's been pushed, it stages it for me, and I can approve it or provide feedback to Kyle. So it really streamlines this entire workflow, no matter if you're just starting out or advanced developer. If you want to sign up, and you should, go to Pacquiao.com, enter your email address, or sign up with GitHub. Launching soon. We've started using it internally. It works great. And to wrap this up, I'd love to talk. I don't want this to be like the end of the conversation, because that would be sad. So hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Brian P. I mentioned Pacquiao.com. If you want to learn about the open source framework, which is the first thing that I showed, go to Pacquiao.org. There's a lot of information there. Metabond.com, again, is my company. If you're looking for a job, you should talk to me. or if you want to hire us, you should also talk to me. I guess I should say that too. And if you want to see that real-time thing that I built, the bloggy post, go to github.com/brianp/realtime-talk, and it's all there. It's like 50 lines of code. It's not bad. And that's it.